Hey, welcome to episode 175 of This Life in Tech, our special Father's Day edition. I'm Jason.
I'm Dan.
And I'm still appalled. I'm TK.
I like how you go with appalled and not disappointed.
I'm very rarely disappointed. Some days I'm just like, oh boy.
Yeah.
Happy Father's Day to everyone out there and to you guys.
Sure.
Ditto. So you're no longer the bad guy.
I've got my special Father's Day mug from this. Danny made this. This is one of his art pieces he made years ago, and he put it on a mug.
Nice.
It's a dragon's eye.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So there's that. Am I no longer the bad guy? Well, that's to be judged by my actions for those people out there.
Oh, geez, man. Hey, sometimes you gotta update your shtick, right?
Well, I agreed with you, which is why I started, just with the twirling of the mustache. It implies.
Yeah, I was going to say it implies a certain Bond-esque supervillain.
Yeah. Oh, it implies several things.
Oh.
Hey,
it does.
So we were going to talk about. There's a lot going on in the NBA outside of politics, just with technology, particularly related around how they're going to try and have like this special. I guess it's not all the teams, right? It's only some teams, and they're having like this special truncated season occurring basically within Disney. Yeah.
Right. So 22 of the 30 franchises are going to be invited to play. There's a breakdown of Western Conference, Eastern Conference teams. They will be put in 3 separate properties in the Disney complex. Mm-hmm. And as we're going to discuss, there'll be no fans. They're still talking about bringing home court wood, bringing those, moving the physical basketball court itself, so that when you're watching a home, you can tell besides the jersey color what the home team is by what floor they have, and they're still working all that out. I think that, and this is all sports right now, and I've watched a lot of this closely. They're having it's a very close working relationship between the players' unions and the leagues themselves. I think Major League Baseball is having the hardest time navigating it. And I think within baseball in particular, they better figure it out, because it's the sport that is least liked by the most coveted demographic of 18 to 34. It's liked by old white guys, and we don't buy anything. And so they have to attract that. And if you seed the emotional well-being of getting sports back on television and creating normalcy, right, which is really what we're talking about when there's this big drive in particular to get television sports back where it belongs, it's about saying, hey, we're going to be normal again, right? And however that looks, and we can argue whether or not we think how people are handling COVID-19 from a political standpoint, from government thing is right or wrong, but getting people emotionally invested in something other than being scared, right? Because as a nation, we're very bad at managing risk and managing emotion, right? Which is part of the big problem with the COVID thing. But the leagues are doing that. NBA they're out in front of it, whether it be social issues, technology, and things like that. And we can also on the back end, we can talk about football, because they're talking about doing some very interesting things as well.
Yeah.
The interesting part about baseball, which in this case, it's I think they're both sides are being extremely selfish in all this.
Yes.
I know baseball, unlike, basketball and football, they actually get more of their, the home team gets more of their revenue from the actual fans in the stand, the concessions and things like that, because not all of them have, a New York Yankees like deal with the Yes Network, or the Baltimore Orioles with, Mass and stuff like that. So the televisions, they're not getting as much, not all of them get as much television revenue.
So here's the numbers. And these numbers are a couple years old. the New York Yankees and the Red Sox in particular were about the same amount of revenue because they have, and the Yankees are a little bit more convoluted because they're the major owner of the YES network. But if you just take straight revenue from NESN, which is New England Sports Network and thing, they're at $180+ million. And so their whole payroll, they can pay with TV rights and not even worry about selling a hot dog. Right?
Yeah.
If you look at the television package for Kansas City or Milwaukee, it's under $5 million. It might be this, like I said, this is a few years old data, but that's the difference. Right?
Yep.
It's always been the disparity in baseball and it started with Steinbrenner, right? When Selig was the commissioner, and for those of you that don't know, he had also been the owner of the Milwaukee Brewers. He said he wanted to do some sort of revenue sharing, and Steinbrenner put his foot down and said, hey, look, if I wanted to own a semi-failing franchise, I would have bought the Brewers. Right? And it's like, how do, like, what's the difference between the guy that owns Nordstrom's and Bezos? Bezos looked at a square foot of real estate, a square foot of space in a building completely different than a retail establishment, right? And so it sets a different benchmark for how you can sell, right? And that in baseball, that's the bigger problem. That guaranteed contracts, right, that the players get, and a extremely squishy luxury tax.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is why the owners are kind of going, look, they're going to wind up playing 50 games. That's what's going to wind up happening, which was what they negotiated back in March, and it'll be fully prorated. Right now, they're all arguing on the couple of millions of dollars, but largely it's because the owners know there's no fans in the stand, and they're not going to recoup the money. So they're both paying.
Here's the thing: it's extremely tone deaf with an industry and professional baseball in particular that's had year over year success, especially considering that the demographic shifts and who likes baseball. And when you have double digit unemployment and people see millionaires arguing with billionaires, we can argue the economics of it and why I think why I think all these athletes deserve more of the pie, and why I think the owners get a really sweet deal out of it, in normal circumstances. But to have that, it's an emotional bad look that the NBA and professional football are not having right now.
Yeah.
Well, and what I liked about this approach with the NBA is they basically said, look, it's in everybody's best interest if we can figure something out and how to get this going. And here's our plan. It's like 100 pages or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And they lay out in somewhat good detail how we're going to go about trying to do this with minimizing as much risk as we can and preserving the spirit and intent of the sport. And and the entertainment part of it too. And of course the business part of it drives all that. But they kind of figured it out. And to me, the technology is fascinating. Like, I hadn't heard of the Oura ring. Maybe in like passing I had, but I'd never really like seriously looked into it until I started reading this article. Like, this thing's actually pretty advanced.
No, the Oura ring, I think, is very, very forward leaning.
Yeah.
In what they're asking technology to do from, what I would call like a biohacking point of view.
What's the efficacy of the actual data it's bringing? I mean, I haven't looked much into it. So how accurate is it?
My understanding is it's let's separate it into a couple parts because it has different sensors for different things. The accelerometer is the accelerometer. I think we've well figured out how to program those sensors, how to build them and program against them. Okay. The way it does heart rate and respiration is different, my understanding. So like our Garmin's use, I think the iWatch use the green light that they emit onto the skin, and they're trying to look at blood flow, right? This doesn't use that green light sensor. It uses a different kind of sensor.
Right.
And it's on the finger, which is different. So like if you notice, I mean, I'm left-handed, but I can't really wear a green sensor on that arm because of the tattoo. It will mess with it. The Garmin isn't too bad, but like the first iWatch that I had was horrible against it because of the colors. Anyway, so this doesn't have any of those problems. My understanding is it's about as accurate as you can get with a surface measurement. So I mean, it's in the high 90s.
So in essence, as if it starts to detect, temperature change, blood flow, things like that, even if it's, of course, not 100%, but it's good. It detects a change. Then you go to your team doctor and go, hey, this thing's registered to change. I think we should get tested here.
Right. And that's what their plan is, right? Because the Oura ring says they can detect COVID-like symptoms, which would be most likely fever, right? But they can do it within it's a 3-day accuracy to 90%, which means plus or minus 2.7 days.
Right.
Right.
Well,
and so
and it's going to get better the longer they're wearing it.
Well, that's what I was just getting ready to say. Right? That's with what size is that existing data set? And now if this comes out, I mean, aside from the technology piece, what a great marketing opportunity is for Oura.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this is like free advertising 101. I'm gonna give everybody in the NBA 8 of those rings. I want you to wear them, one on each finger. If we make a nose ring, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna give it away to you because you can't buy that kind of positive publicity.
Well, and I'm wondering, like, would they even make a ring size big enough for, like, if Shaquille O'Neal was still playing today? Because that dude is huge.
I guarantee you they would make it. They'd have an artist handcrafting that thing this afternoon.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, from a business side, if you had an opportunity to do that because of all of the stuff that's associated with giving that dude a ring with your brand name on it, like you'd have to think long and hard about how many factories do I have to buy and go into debt for in order to make this happen. Because come on, man.
The NPV on this is just going to be amazing. I mean, you can't buy, in reality, this type of publicity. It's just this is all about the perfect storm of something happening and these guys going, hey, I've got an idea.
Yeah.
That CMO is going to hop in his sleeping bag and go to sleep for a while and let the whole thing just run and come back out and go, look at me, I'm the best CMO on the planet.
Yeah.
Well, in my understanding, real quick, just to answer your question, the last part, the other sensor is the body temperature sensor, which takes a skin reading. My understanding is it's into the hundredths of accuracy. So like a 0.01 change, it'll detect it.
Nice.
That's pretty sensitive.
Yeah.
So what are these things retailing for?
I have no idea, dude. Let me click buy.
They're not, like, I was looking at it going, that's not something that's crazy I don't want to buy.
300. Dude, that's dirt cheap for a wearable.
Yeah, especially when you balance it against Garmin watch or an Apple watch or anything like that.
Shit. Well, and I'll tell you, there's some other benefits to it too. And this makes me wonder how they got to the point of thinking about this. Because if you've worn a wearable, it does have weight to it, right? And so if I were playing a sport that depended on me using a dominant hand to perform, like shooting, I wouldn't want a wearable on that arm. Now, but you typically, like a watch, want it on your dominant hand because you're moving, right?
Well, that's the thing in the article. You look at, they're going to be required to wear the ring and the magic band 24/7 unless they're on the court.
Right. So it makes me, I find it really interesting they went with a ring. I'd have to imagine this thing weighs a considerable amount less than a watch.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, my guess is it probably weighs the same amount as any other type of ring you would wear.
I would guess so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's titanium, so titanium's not a heavy metal anyway.
Yeah.
So then if you go from, if we make the assumption that this thing functions as advertised, which having looked at and thought about and contemplated getting one of these quite a lot, I believe that when you compare it to like all the other wearables out there, it's comparable or even better in some aspects. Right? Sure. I'm not a big ring wearer at all. And if you talk about, right now, like working out 2 hours a day, that's 2 hours a day I don't have it on there, right? You start to lose, especially when you're working out, I think you lose some valuable data, right? Because that's the whole purpose of wanting to wear, right? Is yes. I want to have that data, right? And I don't know if lifting, I'd have to, have that feel on to know whether I'm going to wear that or not while I'm working out, right?
Right.
So now we move from, we agree that the technology functions as advertised. What's the efficacy and how are we going to, you're basically, that's a contact tracer right there,
Mhm.
Right. And by the way, for everybody out there in YouTube land, my head's going to explode on social media if I see another screenshot of the health app on an iPhone and you saying, hey, they've installed a contact tracer on there. They haven't. If you read the paragraph that's directly under it that most of you post, it says it's basically they've exposed the APIs to be able to use it if you install an app. So if you don't install an app, who cares?
That's right. That's right. Well, and so particularly, I like the idea of how the NBA is pairing this ring for the biometrics with the Disney Magic Band.
Yeah.
And I don't know that they're going to. I have to imagine if nobody hasn't yet, they will soon approach them to access this data for research. Because man, what a perfect environment, man. So you have a completely controlled physical environment because they're within the Disney property, and Disney controls do like drops of rain. They can. It's amazing what they have.
How many IoT sensors do you think that they have in that park?
Oh, Jesus, dude.
I mean, think about that. Man, think about that from a management standpoint.
I mean, especially because they're all, all those sensors. I mean, what's the square footage? What's the square footage of Disney? How many acres?
A lot.
Oh, dude,
a lot. A metric, a lot.
This is an appropriate time to say fuck ton.
Yeah.
A metric fuck ton.
It would not surprise me if the number was 1 million or more.
Right. Think about that. Think about the search that they have to have out there. Right.
You're always within range of a sensor.
Right. That's what I mean. You're literally, anchoring from sensor to sensor. And then I would also say, and it's probably legacy now, how many
Are they doing this with Bluetooth? Are they doing this with Bluetooth?
I'm not sure. But
it's a near field communication.
Yeah.
But I'll put it to you this way, because I know with the Magic Band, when I've been in the parks, and this is definitely true in the cruise ships too, the sensors are dense enough that they can essentially track you as a blip on a diagram moving in real time. And there's no interruption to it. Like you're just a dot moving.
So outdoors, they could put a Bluetooth 5 LE sensor. It's about 1,000 meters in terms of range. So my guess is they're probably going around, you're probably within 200 meters of a sensor at all times, because they're probably going to triangulate like they would with, like cell towers.
Yeah, so you have at least 2, if not 3.
Yeah, so, easily 1 million. Because that's just outdoors. Indoors, you're going to have to be more dense, right? Because you don't want shit bouncing off walls. So,
but think about that. I mean, that's just, think about the management issue, right? And if you go pick one of the vendors and go, hey, what's your manager doing today for us? And because it's Disney, you're going to get the respect. And, my view is with that industry beginning, the certs are going to be free and people are going to have to pay for the management and pay through the nose because you can't give that job to a guy and say, hey, make sure our certs don't run out.
Could you imagine being their storage vendor? Cha-ching.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Cha-ching.
Yeah. I mean, like terabytes per day.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
It would surprise me. It was terabytes, per hour.
Sure.
Right. You know what I mean? But it's just this gargantuan need to warehouse information.
When you want to talk about, I wonder if they've gotten up to a Yoda byte yet.
A Yoda byte. I like the name of that.
Yeah, that's what YOTTA. It's
yeah. It wouldn't surprise me because this is just the sensor that we're talking about. I know it's not part of the NBA program, but you're also always on video, always. I mean, obviously the exceptions are bathrooms, private spaces, rooms, stuff like that.
Or so we've been told. I do know that for a fact that on a cruise ship that there is no expectation of privacy unless you're in your stateroom or the restroom.
Correct. I would agree with that. That's been my experience. Yeah.
No, I know that for a fact because I know how that I spent a lot of time in that industry working those things. In fact, funnily enough, people are, the larceny that's in certain humans. I was on one of the ships working with the security team years ago, Lady came in, said that she slipped on a drink, and now there's, she slipped balls, right? Well, they're like, man, where, roughly what time of the day? And they're taking the report. What time of day? Where was it at? And they have her on video, and they're like, okay. And they're like, hey, let us go down there and show her. I'll come back in an hour. Well, when they came back in an hour, they had the video, and I knew the security officer said, hey, come here and watch. This is going to be funny. And they sit her down, and they go, okay, is this you want to sign this? She's like, yes. They go, all right, before you sign it, let's watch this. And they watch her walk around. She looks around. And she just basically takes a drink and throws it on there, and then just gingerly lays down and goes, my back. And she's like, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
Right? And it doesn't help them to like prosecute these people or anything else. Just, hey, let's keep some honest people honest.
Yeah, sure.
What's my expectation of privacy on this vessel? And they're like, 0, except in public restrooms in your stateroom.
Right. And I don't know that, in my opinion, I don't know that it's a bad thing.
I actually think in the cruise industry in particular, and even Disney to a certain extent, because it's a children's event, right? And that magic band is a low jack for a kid.
Yeah, they
right?
are.
And so you do have, you've got name, all that stuff of that that's associated with that band, and they don't come off easy.
No, they don't. They
right?
don't.
By design, right? By design, they don't, and that's a good thing. So if you get busy buying some junk food and you turn around, your kid's not there, it's a relatively easy mechanism to find them, especially on the cruise ship. Because a Disney cruise, for those of you that don't know, is designed for 2 things. 1, to low jack your kid and keep them away from the parents long enough so the parents can go sit at one of the many bars and get hammered while the kids are being entertained by unbelievable staff. Right? And depending on what cruise line you're on, to varying degrees, that's a truism everywhere, except for some of them are catering towards older folks, right? And
like you.
Well, yeah, like me, not that old. But that's, I think that they've gotten bigger and better and faster at that, right? It used to be a pager, something could fall off a kid.
Right.
Now it's basically, or something that could be removed from a child really easily and chucked.
Well,
right?
see,
now you're gonna work at it.
What I've liked about it, having experienced the consumer side of being at the parks with these bands or on the boats with these bands, is not only is your kid low jacked, but that low jack is inherently bound to everybody else that's bound into that account.
Right.
And so, right, it's a one-to-one identification when they ship them to you, if you guys have never done this, and they come in a box and you pick the color you want because they come in an array of colors. And then when you go to the park, you're activating it and it's against your ID. Like for me, it's my passport or my driver's license. And now that is bound to my identity. And so anytime anything happens, they can they can go find you because they know exactly where you're at.
Right. And more importantly, it's tied to your credit card.
Yes. Which I'll tell you what, there's obviously the business side, right? Like we were talking before. What did you say? 20-30% increase in spending?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's easily that. Yeah.
Completely. Here's the thing I really like. Because I remember growing up and going on a few, not very many, but a few vacations with my parents, in the late 80s, early 90s. And thievery was the big thing, getting pickpocketed, right? Dude, I mean, you can try to like jack that NFC communication, but I think they have it pretty figured out. I don't have to worry about getting pickpocked. I don't have to carry a wallet with me because it has my ID in it too.
Right.
As long as I'm within a property, you know what I mean? Dude, it's
right.
so convenient. I love it. Cashless, so you're also controlling the spread of disease, right? Even just simple germs. You don't have to worry about your workers skimming from the till because it's contactless, cashless transactions.
No
That's right.
Honestly, it's not even like I worked at an amusement park when I was in high school. I lived on one side of a lake and the amusement park was on the other side, and all the kids ended up working there, right? When I started out, I worked as a sweeper. Makes you a little handle, pail, and you walk around as a 16-year-old. Turns out that was the best job on earth because you weren't tied, you weren't leashed to a ride or a game. You just walk around. And the older dudes that's their second or third season in high school, they're like, look, a lot of people drop money. You never pick it up. You just sweep it in the bucket when you go around the corner. Then you take the money out. And they go, what do we do with it? And they go, we keep it. Right? And this is in the 70s, right? And all the buses from Boston would show up in the weekend, these big tour groups and everything like that. And people were dropping money left, right, and center. Right? Mm-hmm. We were the wealthiest, we were the highest paid employees in the park just because people would drop money all the time.
Yeah. So
Go ahead.
Jason, when you're talking about the aspect for like the fraud piece, as TK is bringing up the money, putting that into the bucket. Think about this. Even if it got jacked, as soon as that jacked sensor comes online, there's going to be an address conflict, and it's going to disable both of them until you prove yours is the one. So it reduces fraud, because this is not one of those things where I'm taking it off Disney property. And it's because at that point it's worthless. There's no sensor.
And so that the other thing too, because I tried this, because we've gone multiple times. We have to remember too. I lived like 2 exits down the street from Disneyland, so we were going all the time, and Disney World and all this shit. Every time you book one of these big trips and you opt in, because you can opt into it. It's not mandatory. At least it wasn't a couple years ago. It may be now, but when you opted in and they sent you those bands, you always got a new band. You can't reuse the old ones. So they're bound to a time duration. They're only good between this date and this date, and only on certain properties and things like that, right? Like we did a trip one time to give people an idea, where we did a Caribbean cruise, and we did a few days in Disney World, did the cruise, and then did a few more days. That was 3 separate bands.
Yeah, totally. I'm down. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I like that because it confines it.
Right, and then was down.
Yeah,
like there's no way.
TK's out. TK, as his 17-year-old TK isn't making any more money. No,
I worked in a convenience store, and I did essentially the same thing, except I got to also run a buffer and buff the floors, which I always liked. We always called those street tips. It was the street tipping you for your hard work.
Yeah.
No, you'd walk out of there, all the money in the world for a 15, 16-year-old kid.
Yeah.
The best part about it is we also did not have to clean rides when people barfed on them, right? That was the ride operator had to clean that. I had a buddy of mine that, when he wanted a break, he would just keep his ride spun around in multiple directions. He'd just keep it going until somebody yacked, and that was a 30-minute break while he walked slowly one place to the other to get all the cleaning stuff. Yeah. Now, I'm sure that having been to, because Busch Gardens is huge around here. Having been to Busch Gardens a number of times, they're much more efficient with that now.
Yeah, I would suspect so.
So
it's going to be interesting to see how this season comes out. I have a tangential interest in that type of data for research, just because of some partnerships I have with other departments on campus that are like the pharmacy people do research into things like this, like using ambulatory heart rate to predict. Seems like it's going to what degree they're going to make this data available, even if you have to sign some kind of contract to get access to it. Man, that'd be fabulous. You can learn so much about this.
Did you see what the NFL is looking at doing?
No, what are they looking at?
They're looking at it's kind of like a bolt-on mask on the shield, on the face mask, and then mandating that everybody's got a shield on their helmets.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And I think in football, either one, but I think it lends itself more because that mask is more about atomization than it is being a close thing. You're still putting it this far away, and if you can get it where people don't feel like they're getting restricted airflow, then that's that looks really cool. Like,
so much.
If they have to put the even a clear shield on it, one of the most severe injuries, for the most part, goes away because I'm not going to be able to grab that face mask now.
Right.
Yeah.
It's putting the shield, and then there's like it's an open. It's like you've got a molded plastic piece, and then in the pieces is a material or whatever they're using to thing. And I like football more than basketball, just because it's the size of the team, right? You go from 12 players to 80 people on the court, right? I mean, even with coaches and everything, you're talking about probably 16 to 18 people per team on the court.
Right.
Sitting thing is it's the population sample of what you have to control is demonstrably smaller.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Football, you're going to have 47 dudes dressed plus trainers, coaches, and everybody else. You're talking probably 60 plus people on the sideline.
So I wonder if they will no longer allow like the practice players, stuff like that, on the sidelines. Are they going to limit it to only those that can dress?
Right. Well, I'll tell you, there's two interesting things that I'm kind of morbidly curious about. As far as I can tell, and listening and talking to people that are into like the virology of this, right? There's a big difference in the amount necessary to expose you to COVID when you're outside versus inside.
Yes.
And in addition to that, it seems like UV has something to do with it. So you're less likely to get it during the day than you are at night.
Well, by blood type as well.
And blood type.
Like if you're in the A antigen group, or you're more likely to get it than the O antigen group.
And there seems to be something with vitamin D, which then corresponds to. I'm really interested because I'm assuming, this is an assumption, but I'm assuming basketball players tend to practice inside, whereas football players tend to practice outside. So if I had to guess,
actually, that's changing depending on the location. Yeah, like most of the northern teams now have big indoor practice facilities, obviously, so they can get consistent weather. You know, Patriots don't use theirs a lot. They end up latter half of the week getting outside, but and then some of the southern teams are doing it for the exact opposite reason, because in August it's butt ass hot, and they don't want to have to worry about the heat casualties.
Oh, that's interesting to know, because what I was going to say was, if I had to, at least in the U.S., what is it, man? Like 70% of the people are vitamin D deficient.
Oh yeah,
and 30% of that 70% is like severely deficient. If I had to guess one or the other, and it's not exclusive, so it's just a guess, football player versus basketball player, which one's more likely to be vitamin D deficient? I was going to say that I would guess the basketball player, but I didn't realize that there's more. Why? And I don't know, man. I don't know how domes or indoor practice arenas, because of their size, man. That'd be interesting to find out.
Right.
See, but this is, I think, some of the interesting shit we can learn as a society about, because this ain't the last pandemic, right?
Well,
no, there'll be another one. There'll be another one in 2 years.
Yeah. I think that I'm going to leave that alone. I was ready to go off on a 45-degree there and just be like,
that's it. I'm just going by the data.
On everybody. and
every 2 to 2.5 years, there's another COVID, another coronavirus variant. So it's just
the whole thing with vitamin deficiencies, and I spend a lot of time contemplating this, is we don't test for it in the standard blood test, right? When you do a CBC and stuff like that, we test for the minimum you can to put people in a category of, do they need to buy some of our drugs or not, right? That's literally, that's literally what we're down to, right? And it's how medical groups, contemplate policies. Right, and you're looking at administrators making the policies more than doctors, with advice and consent. But at the end, it's, and I've said this to my GP, who's a nice enough fellow, but I go to him for a blood test once a year, or say that I get a physical, right? But I don't lend any credence generally to what he says, right? Because he wanted to argue with me about diet one day, and I was like, from the time you started college, well, the time you were licensed to practice medicine or touch another human without adult supervision, how many years was that? He's like 10 years. So in that 10 years, how much time did you spend learning about the relationship between food and nutrition and your body? He's like, okay, point taken. Mm-hmm. Because even as recently as a year or two ago, the AMA put up a huge fight when they wanted to come out and mandate that they had 8 of their continuing education units had to be in nutrition. Mm-hmm. Even the hospital groups to a certain extent, because once you start educating people on nutrition, you're creating dissent, right? Because what somebody thinks is really valuable to put in your body, other people may not think. And we can't, as a medical population, they can't make money off supplements. They can't make money off having you eat whole foods, right? Mm-hmm. Right. And the biggest problem that we have in America right now is people being overweight. 78% of people are considered to be overweight. I'm not talking in the obese or the morbidly obese category, which is about almost 50% now. If you put people that are casually overweight, that drives that number up considerably. The big thing that's associated with that is inflammation because of what we're eating. Yeah, it's lack of movement, but it's what we're eating. And we're heavily into processed foods, and those processed foods do a lot to cause inflammation, right? People are vitamin D deficient because of what we don't eat anymore, right? And what's the cost to go through on an annual blood test when you're at your physical and go, this is what you're deficient in, right? The labs I get tell me by vitamin, by essential mineral and stuff, what I'm deficient in. And so I take 10,000 IUs of vitamin D a day because I was deficient in vitamin D. How closely do I want to watch that now that it's the summertime and I can go take my shirt off and go stand outside for a little while and get a little bit of vitamin D? Right? Is there that big a thing? Do I need to be that nitnoid about it? Probably not. Right? But there's a level where people associate or approach, and I'm a lot more OCD about it than a lot of other people. Right. And
Sure.
it's also in the thing of like, I used to be on a lot of medications for arthritis and a bunch of other things. I'm on almost none now. Right. And the big thing was I changed my relationship with food and paired that to consistent exercise.
Well,
TK, do you take as a supplement just in order to like try to reduce inflammation? Capsaicin, I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but basically cayenne pepper pills.
Yeah. Actually, I'll tell you what, I've actually, because I'm going out in public and sometimes people are doing a thermometer. There's a very specific part of the capsaicin chain that you want to have it gives the most benefit for anti-inflammatory behavior. But I also, much like niacin, I also feel flush when I take it. And I've taken my core temperature and I'm fine, but a surface temperature elevates it comes to your skin. So it's going to elevate the temperature, actually slow down a little bit on that one particular thing. Because of the world we live in right now. And the thing with inflammation is it's not how my joints feel. It's what my soft tissue organs are telling me. Right. And that's where
exactly.
That's if it starts there and emanates its way out. Right. And I am unbelievably conscious about not eating anything or consuming anything that will exacerbate inflammation.
Yeah.
Right. And like I said, I go back again in November for labs, and I've gone plant-based, not because I want plant-based forever, but I've talked to enough people. And in fact, one of my doctors is like, hey, and she's a sub 3 hour marathoner. And she's like, hey, I've gotten a lot better at doing this. And there's the vegan bodybuilding is a big thing now. And like a lot of like that guy that just broke the world deadlift record, lifted 1 million pounds or whatever he lifted. I mean, he's a vegan bodybuilder. Yeah. So what are my labs going to look like? Right. And for me, it's an experiment. It's a hobby. It's like, it's like, what do you do? Like, what do you do on your off time? Like I said, I tell everybody, I figure out how I'm going to live to 150 and basically slide into hell and go, look at what I just did. Right.
Another 150. Another 150.
Yeah. Another 150. Right. But that to me is, we, as a society, we look for an easy button. Right. And the drug companies will prey on that. Right. And when something as simple as vitamin D, when the federal government is telling you to take vitamin D as opposed to we've got a vaccine, right, as a potential, that's when okay, that is really a big deal, because it's not in the best interest of anybody to tell you to use something you can buy over the counter for a very inexpensive price.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and I think there's a direct correlation to the amount of people that are obese with the amount of people who are also vitamin D deficient.
Yeah, oh, no doubt.
Sure there is.
Right.
All those things. So you said you're taking 10,000 IUs. Some of the research that I've been reading says, and maybe because we're in the summer, but 50,000 IUs is what people should be getting at a minimum. So
right. That's from Dr. Rhonda, though, right?
Yeah.
And I don't disagree with her. It's just, when I'm dealing with a medical professional who believes in, this, the Hippocratic thing, to heal thyself, and is really, so I said, hey, let's start with this. When I go get labs, it might be, hey, you're still deficient, take some more.
Yeah, well, right. Because because you may be getting the other 40,000 from the other things that you're doing.
Just by walking out, mowing the yard without my shirt on, type of thing, right? Just getting casual sun when you can.
Yeah. And it also depends how deficient you are, because you need let's say a boosted dose to get you back into a normal range, and then you need something that allows you to maintain yourself in that range. But see, this is why I also think the real future headed this way, which seems like you're getting in this integrative care, is matching all this with your genetic profile too, right?
Right.
Because you can have certain genetic anomalies that predispose you or preclude you from certain conditions, or how different compounds interact. You know what I mean?
Well, but
it's actually really complex.
They're saying that if you've got an A variant of blood as opposed to an O variant, you're more likely to get COVID,
right?
Or you're more susceptible, right? You're thing, and so that's I think those are important things. I think the other thing too is we're starting to be able to take genetics and translate that into foods, right? Because everything that I consume may not be genetically perfect for you to consume.
That's right.
Absolutely true. Absolutely
right.
True.
And we're going to say it's not going to be detrimental, but genetically I might not need something. There's a service out there, and I got into it for a very low cost because I had done 23andMe. Right. We talked about this before. I'm adopted. So when somebody says, hey, do you have a history of cardiac problems in your family? I don't know. Right. And all those things. Right. And so trying to kind of feel that around, I did 23andMe. Well, there's a thing called GenoPalette, and they're getting better. When they first came out, I thought it was pretty generic. You give them your 23andMe data, or you can request a swab, and then they'll do all that for you. But so I basically gave them my 23andMe data, and they're very proactive about updating as they find. Same with 23andMe, like they're working on new processes and of finding new data from your DNA every day of the week, right?
Right.
And so, a lot of it is suggestions. They'll create meal plans for you.
Yeah. Well,
right?
and I just got my results back. I just got my results back from the 23andMe. So now I'm going to be uploading that. I'm going to use Rhonda Patrick stuff just because I like a lot of her research.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day to kind of judge the difference in what you're getting, right? To contrast and compare.
Yeah. Just because I want to start off. I know. I mean, the funny part is, so my acupuncturist that I had back when I was living in the DC environment, he is Dean Emeritus at University of Beijing, and he's basically had said almost everything what everyone else is saying right now. But this is years and years ago when I was still heavily competing in martial arts. He's like, look, everyone needs something a little bit different. But your overall diet, he goes, on average, should be 20 to 30% protein. And so what that makeup of protein is depends on who you are.
Right. In what goal you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, right.
Right.
He goes, some people are better with plant protein. Some people are better with fish. Some people are better with, chicken, meat, everyone's a little bit different. But you want to keep it to 20 to 30% of your diet. And of course, I'm saying we all know this now. We know more about this now. He's like, your starches, he's like, very low.
Right.
Like, eat primarily vegetables and fruits.
Yeah, what type of those carbohydrates am I consuming? Right. You need protein for muscle repair and recovery, and you need a certain amount of carbs for energy. Right. I want those whole dense carbs. The problem is now most people in America are to have some level of sugar addiction.
Yeah.
Right. And that empty.
You talk about the real white death. It's not cocaine.
Yeah. Oh no, not at all. Right.
It's sugar.
But think about the site. There's the physiological aspect of being overweight, and then there's psychological, right? And how many times do you see somebody who's overweight, and rather than get up and go out, like if I don't care how obese you are, like Death Star, he's lost what, like 150, 200 pounds, right?
Yeah, he's 458 pounds now. So he's like,
right, but he was tilting 100, right?
Yeah, he was over 600.
Right. So to me, that's amazing. Is he still morbidly obese? Yes. But where is he trending? How's he taking responsibility for his life? Right. I will never, ever, ever look at somebody who's overweight or obese running down the street, huffing and puffing and make fun of them because they're overweight. You know what they've done? They've decided to make a change that works, and not going to get your nails and hair done or getting right, and having, going out and buying new clothes to kind of cover up. It's like, hey, I've got to look at myself and I've got to change, right? The positive spiritual and emotional impact of turning that corner and saying, I'm not going to do something that's adverse for myself, right? We as humans inflict a lot of damage on ourselves. And when see it physiologically, there's a huge emotional tie into that. And once you start to, a couple of weeks or about a month ago now, they were in Virginia, like they took a poll and they said, it was a pretty decent sample size, like tens of thousands of people. And they said, what shouldn't we open? Like, as we reopen the state, what shouldn't we open? And it's 78% of respondents said we shouldn't open gyms. And so I'm like, why does that 78% number ring true to me? And if you take everyone that's overweight, not obese and morbidly obese, but you take everybody that's overweight, or BMI of 21 or greater, it's roughly 78%. It's like 77 and change, right? So it was reflective of it's almost like there's an envy that, okay, I'm not willing to, I haven't made the choice to get up and change myself, right? And so, we've done I don't know how this happened, but when we call it fat shaming or you call it whatever, right? Part of the program I'm going through right now, I have a lot of like-minded people that are in this program with me. And one of the dudes showed up, he's like 20, 30 pounds. And he's like, I needed to come here to get fat shamed, right? Because, he wants to get back to where he was 10, 15 years ago. Right. And I jokingly said, I fat shamed myself in my house for about 6 months as I was doing the same thing. Right. And so there are very few people that throughout their life are this Zen-like discipline the whole time that don't let life impede in them stopping to take care of themselves. Right. The bigger problem is when people say, I want to change, that they want that change to happen overnight. And that's what discourages progress. And if you see somebody, like if you're 600 plus pounds like Death Star was, and you've now lost another adult man in 158, 160 pounds, everybody around you in your emotional support group, your professional support group, has to celebrate that.
Right? They should.
I'm sure he quit smoking. Right? That's to be celebrated.
I'm not sure if he has that or not.
But you understand what I'm saying? Any positive step somebody takes, and then when you get in shape and you can look in, like you can go, I can look in the mirror now and go, okay, I need to relax on this type of carb and stuff like that. Why? Because I'm an OCD nerd. And I put it on spreadsheets and I chart it and do stupid shit like that. But to me, it's more of a hobby that just affects my well-being.
Right.
I look at it like that, and so I want to get to a place that I'm better.
Yeah, amen. I mean, I look at things, and this is, and I always brutalize his name, but Friedrich Nietzsche, he said, the Superman, you've got to combine your mental and physical well-being in order to be that. If you're not excelling at both, then you can never be super. And so,
talk amongst yourselves for a second. I have to step away and take care of a dog.
Yeah. So wait,
are you advocating the idea of an Ubermensch?
I'm just advocating the aspect of if you want to achieve greatness, then you can't just limit yourself to physical or mental. You have to do both.
Yeah, well, I tease a little bit because the idea, Nietzsche's idea of Ubermensch is grossly miscategorized, particularly by the Nazis. Yeah. They took it as an idea of racial superiority, and that's not at all. What Nietzsche was actually arguing was about Christian dogma and the idea of transcendence and becoming something bigger than you because you subscribe to an idea that's much, much, much bigger than you. That's the whole idea. And it's the integration of spirit and non-spirit. That's really what he was talking about philosophically. But as we're talking about it, it's part of it too. Bodhidharma said this when he invented Shaolin Kung Fu, right? Yeah. When he woke up and saw that the monks were frail, he after meditating, staring at the wall for, I don't remember the story how long, but it was a long time. He said, well, wait, in order to train the mind, we first have to train the body. And he invented Shaolin Kung Fu. That's the story. Same idea.
It's very similar. So I just got finished reading an 18th century journal from a samurai named Matsumoto. And it's interesting because, the samurai way, if you were a monk, you could still be a part of the samurai way. You already have your compassion. But in order to be properly compassionate, you need to train with the spirit of the warrior and train the physical body. So this way you can maintain your compassion. In order for the samurai to maintain the samurai way, they need to learn from the monk in order to have that compassion, because they already have the physical. So it's, you have to be both. And if you don't train in that way, you are not living the samurai way.
It's really an interesting Eastern take on, in the West, what we inculcated as the liberal arts, the original liberal arts from the medieval. Well, actually going all the way back to the Greeks. But I'll finish with this because I gotta run. My favorite, in fact, way more favorite than Sun Tzu, is Miyamoto Musashi with the Book of Five Rings. And you've heard me say this a million times. That famous quote: when you know the way, you can see it in everything. Right?
Right.
That's really what it is. You've integrated all these different aspects of existence, not in perfection, but to the degree in which you, as Nietzsche was arguing with the Übermensch, you can transcend what it is to be normal. Mm-hmm. That's my take on that, man.
Well, it's never one thing, right? Part of this thing is they call it manual therapy. Some people call it a sports massage, but the person that does it is brutal. And I mean in the best way. I thought through chiropractic and everything that my back was back to where it needed to be. And every now and then I had a little twinge. Since getting this and releasing the fascia and doing it, like getting in there and doing that, this is the best my back has felt in probably 20 years. Right? Because
are you going based
mechanism of injury and everything starts tightening up around it to try to defend against it. And now that through, from a muscular skeletal connection point, I'm doing the things. I'll tell people all the time, if you're not doing things to make your T-spine more flexible, you're damaging your long-term health.
Oh, absolutely true.
Right.
Yeah. So are they putting you through a thing that's almost like, you're going through like two different roller pins and they're
No, this is lady hands on, elbows on,
got it.
Like really getting after it.
So back in the day, like I was, in this machine, and you're basically like almost like going through like a two roller pins in a way, but one was flat, but they would put down the base of the roller pin, and it was the most excruciating thing during the process.
Yeah,
but it literally from the neck, shoulders, all the way down to the heel, it just rolled it out. Physical therapist basically doing it, and I mean in reality was only about 2 minutes, probably for the process. Felt like hours. After I got up, I was like, "Woo! I'm ready to go work out again." I mean, it was just, it was great.
The program now, and they catalog everything you do, like every rep you do, what way, and so there's a lot of things that are tied to this as far as cataloging how we get old. And from each different group along the way, and where you start, where you finish. I work out. I have 2 days, an hour each workout. 3 times a week I go to chiropractic. 2 times a week I float, do the hour in the float tank, to where you go. There's a lot. There's sensory and there's a physical piece of that. And then the manual therapy. I do cognitive and speech. There's another different brain component to it that I'm going to do after that. It's in sequence with it, not concurrent with it. And then, based on what I want for a diet and what my goals are, they make all my meals for me. And so for this month of doing that, there's a total control group for every aspect of my well-being.
That's awesome.
Even to how much I sleep and everything like that.
Right.
And so even as finely tuned as I thought I was, even both in knowledge and physical, like my ability to adjust kind of how I look, what I want, I've learned so much there. And a lot of it with the exercising is, hey, what are the modern things, right? A little bit older, you have traditionally how you learned how to lift. And then for me, it's using those exercises, using a lot of the core movements and doing them differently to take care of your skeletal infrastructure.
Right.
I think that, to me, it's been fascinating because of the learning experience. And the trainer I have, she was a track athlete at Kentucky. She worked for the football team at Kentucky and Florida, and she most recently came from the Olympic Training Center, right? And she's she's got her master's in exercise science, and she's into it along with the rest of the staff that's equally correct. And it's
highly probable she knows what she's talking about.
Yeah. No, but even just, like now, she's like, as I'm entering the 3rd week, she's like, all right, what exercises do you like, understanding things. So I'm going to say, hey, today we're going to do rotational core. I want you to pick a 4 exercise superset, right? And do that. And it literally has changed how I think about working out. And even to a certain extent with the nutritionist is how I look at supplements. Right. And the food labels. This is one of those things we can get at, like in a different conversation, get into the efficacy of how they label food and supplements and what to look for to know what you're getting for quality.
Oh, sure.
It's super easy. I mean, but it's one of those things, if you don't notice it, everything's packaged to kind of look the same so that you buy the pretty package or what you buy in on the label, on the front of the box or container, not the back.
Right.
I think so. I think, it's one of those things where I wish everybody could have this experience, because for me, even as somebody that's really into this, I'm learning quite a bit, even about my own mobility at my age. And I'm a lot more mobile than I thought I was. I just had to do the prep work the first week of kind of grinding through. Hey, I don't do that very often, so this doesn't feel so good the next day.
Well, and I think that's one of the biggest things with almost everything we talk about. It's not snapshot occurrences of greatness. It's atomic consistency, small little pieces accumulated over big parts of time. Yeah,
I mean, the motivation doesn't last. You have to be disciplined in what you do, and that creates that consistency.
Yep, exactly.
And and that's in anything, right?
I agree, 100%. Well then, guys, I'm off to have a little hike. And then some brunch.
Awesome. All right, my friends.
Everybody have a great week.
Have a great week.
You too. I'll see you guys soon. Take care.
Yeah.
Happy Father's Day. Bye-bye.
Later.
Bye.